So the idea is, while we might have very numerous tactical understanding of what we should do right now, for example, we fight for the main organizations of the working class to take up specific transitional demands. That way, if they take these as their program, right, they can rally workers around them, fight for them, right, and we can also use that as a means of pushing for socialism, explaining that we can't achieve these things short of socialism. And this is why it can't just be a struggle for reforms within our existing organizations. It can't be just a struggle for political power. It's got to be all of the above. That way, we're always part of the working class. We're always pushing. We're always the most advanced section. We're never the roadblocks. We're always the advanced section, but we're also always fighting with them whenever their struggles are there. We're fighting in organizations. We're fighting for the cause of working people, but we're also fighting for something more than just the reformist class struggle, but for the revolutionary class struggle, for socialism. So my experience with the SWP in that, as far as the transitional method goes, is mainly through unions. I don't know if people are familiar with the group, probably not, but basically the way that they function is it's all about industrial unions, which I respect. I think that's great. They're all about industrial unions, or every one of their members, which by the way generally have about 10 degrees each, because they were part of the student movement in the 60s. But every single one of their members has to go into industrial unions or they are expelled, basically. I think it's kind of an absurdist approach to it, but whatever, fine, you go into the unions. My experience with them in unions, however, is since they don't push for transitional demands, they tend to not get involved in anything because they refuse to be part of the bureaucracy, so they won't run for offices. However, I do believe, and I have seen many radicals that say, well, I need to be part of this movement, even, no matter how bad it is, and they run for office. And I have seen many of them get sucked into it. So in both aspects, it seems like to avoid that, and actually I've seen some other Trotskyist groups do that, but from a different perspective, to avoid getting involved in the mass organizations like the unions, no matter how awful they are, depending on the union, they inevitably either get sucked into the bureaucracy, they get sucked into the status quo and not actually pushing for workers' demands, or they do the opposite and they become insular little sects within the unions, and workers do not relate to them, and they have nothing to do with what's going on around them. And so it seems to me that this method, the transitional method, again, showing in the negative, from where I came from, it really works. It's the method that we've used when we had a major tendency within Britain that people called the third largest political party at the time, the militant, and this is precisely the method that they employed there, and they ended up leading like huge labor councils and things like that from it, but not giving into the bureaucracy. They in fact were far more radical than any leader. This is why I don't believe that they were. I guess I've heard some people say that our tendency is social democratic or something because we participate in mass organizations. I'd say the exact opposite. That in fact, what we're trying to do is build a Marxist-Leninist party, not in the Maoist sense, but in my view, in the actual sense of a mass party of the working class through these organizations. So this is one of the reasons why we push for a couple of things. And I wanted to bring these up because I wanted to gauge people's interest or see where people are at on it. We have started recently a campaign for a mass party of labor, just our organization, and not as a front group. We want to just build a labor party. We don't care. We wanted to have a socialist program, obviously, but any mass party of labor that's based on the unions we're in favor of or pushing for. And that's what the whole point of the organization is. And it's just kind of to gauge the interest and see what people think about it, and what they want to do about it, actively fighting for a party for our class, for us as working people, regardless of how awful its leadership might end up being if everyone one ever shows up. Obviously, more than likely end up being a reformist one at first. But the other thing was we are in support of Hugo Chavez's call for a Fifth International. which I believe was a call that he made. You know, while I might be critical of things that that Chavez has done or doesn't do or whatever, although I'm a big fan, that I think that this is something that happened because that people in this country realize that an international party of the working class is what's necessary. Without an international party of socialist revolution, we're not going to get to where we need to be as far as achieving socialism. One tiny landlocked country cannot, especially in this globalized economy, exist. I mean, there may be, obviously, like there's going to be individual gains, and countries may take over power in a specific country as a socialist, but in the end it will be crushed. And this is something, in my view, that Lenin was very specific about. If the European Revolution failed, Lenin was very specific that the Russian Revolution would fail, with no question. So yeah, I think this is where we need to be, especially when we have all these tiny little countries that are all so very interconnected in the international community. Now more than ever, not only do we need, we need international unions, forget about it, but when it comes to international socialism, we need an international socialist party, in my view. So, yeah, I guess that's where I came from. That's my whole, journey from where I was at to where I came, to where I was at, where I'm at now, as far as being involved with the Workers' International League and the International Marxist Tendency. But I wanted to kind of go over our program just really quickly, just some of the demands that we do have, just to kind of show where, what are our transitional demands and what our program is for the United States of America, and obviously connected with that, the World Socialist Revolution. So the first point of the program is we're for the right to strike, union representation, and collective bargaining. We're for repealing all anti-union laws, including Taft-Hartley, ending compulsory arbitration and the victimization of trade unionists and those forming new unions. We're for unionizing the unorganized, mobilizing the rank and file to fight the bosses' attacks, and we're for a unified labor movement that has the power to beat the bosses and their politicians. As far as the unions go, we're for trade union democracy. We're for all union officials to be regularly elected with the right of immediate recall by the membership. We're for all officials to receive the average wage of a skilled worker plus vetted expenses. I think that's very important. These two things are very important in relation to labor, because when it comes down to unions, as we've seen in many of the larger international unions, it gets very hard the higher up you go within the union bureaucracy to give a crap about the guy who's actually doing the work, and to think more about where am I going to be. So I think that pushing for something like trade union democracy, which a lot of unions at least ostensibly have, but also for fighting for an equality in wages with the highest, even the highest paid worker being what the official makes, is really a way to link the top layers of the union with the working class. We're also for a mass party of labor based on the unions. The labor movement must break with the Democrats. We're for a militant, class-independent program against the attacks of big business and the boss's political parties. By fighting for socialist policies that can truly address the needs and aspirations of workers and youth, a genuine workers' party would get a mass echo. I definitely think that if there was a labor party within the United States that was very open about some of the being for very specific things that are in favor of working people, it could get a huge echo, a huge amount of support. I don't think that it would be an immediate win for the Labor Party of the United States at all, necessarily, but it would definitely get an echo. There are a lot of people right now that are breaking from the Democrats because of Obama and in the Congress that had a supermajority that now has nothing, but did nothing while they had it. They're looking for something else, and a lot of them are going to splinter or not vote, which is, I believe, the reason why so many Republicans won, is massive abstention. And this could fill that void. We're for full employment and housing, no to layoffs, 30 hours work for 40 hours pay, the right to a secure full-time job, full benefits or a place in education, for a national minimum wage of at least $16 per hour, wages to be adjusted for inflation through periodic costs of living adjustments, COLA, which used to be part of union contracts and no longer, for union control over hiring and firing, establish union-controlled job training and hiring halls in communities with high unemployment, all temporary workers to be made full-time with equal pay and treatment, voluntary retirement at age 55 with full benefits, no to the privatization of Social Security, and homelessness, quality housing for all, with rent fixed at not more than 10% of wages, for a massive program of public works to create jobs and housing and to rebuild our infrastructure, inner cities in the Gulf Coast. Basically, you know, when it comes to full housing, full employment in housing, a lot of the division, you know, working people, like Marx says, working people that are not organized are essentially just raw material for exploitation.